Every story of human evolution begins with a question. What if something else had mattered more? Not intelligence, not empathy, not tools, but brute force. Imagine a world where a single genetic hiccup rewrote the blueprint of our species, a mutation that amplified muscle density, thickened bone, and rewired the body for power over precision. One small change, and natural selection smiled on the strong. Scientists call such shifts cascade mutations. In this timeline, myostatin suppression runs rampant. The natural brakes on muscle growth vanish. Bones restructure for stress tolerance. Tendons shorten for explosive torque. The result is a species built to lift mountains. They still use tools, though theirs were less inventions, more extensions of ego. Why carve a spear when you can throw a tree? Their world was louder, heavier, more direct. Prey species vanished faster. Trees fell sooner. The earth learned to brace itself. Anatomy followed function. Hearts grew massive, driving blood through muscles that drank energy like engines. Lungs widened, yet agility fell. These creatures weren't built for distance. They were built for impact. With each generation, strength became currency. Social hierarchies reorganized around who could lift, crush, or throw. In our world, language was the first weapon. In theirs, it was the fist.
Reporting live from the dawn of bad decisions. Behind me, the locals have discovered that the best way to hunt a mammoth is to punch it. Oh! Well, that's one way to start the day. Thank you, Dad.
Ecology bends to strength. Megafauna decline as these early giants consume faster than the biosphere can replace. Soils compact under their footsteps, forests thin. Evolution has chosen a champion with a serious appetite. Each muscle fiber carries triple the power of our own. Each bone weighs almost twice as much. But energy cost is astronomical. A population of these creatures would need more calories per day than an entire village of modern humans. Evolution grants muscle, but charges interest.
My grandfather could snap a tree in half, but starve faster than a rabbit in winter.
Turns out, being hungry and heroic is a bad combo.
Even culture itself reconfigures. Art and ritual celebrate muscle and violence. Myth equates strength with virtue. Early societies form around leaders who win contests of force. The first laws are simple. The strong decide. Across millennia, that philosophy calcifies. To them, the human form isn't a vessel for thought. It's a weapon for existence. And so our story begins, on a planet where brains watch from the sidelines while biceps write history. Civilization, on our timeline, was an act of cleverness. We built pulleys, cranes, wheels, and then learned how to outsource effort. But imagine a world where that outsourcing never needed to happen, where the average citizen could personally deadlift a tree. In the strength-favored timeline, the architects of civilization were literally the strongest among them. Buildings weren't designed for stability or efficiency, they were designed to impress. Why carve delicate columns when you can stack monoliths the size of mountains? Why use scaffolding when your workforce is scaffolding? The first cities of the strong ones rose quickly, rough, powerful, and indestructible. Walls were single stones hauled by tribes of titans. Roofs? Entire slabs placed by hand. The skyline was less urban sprawl, more bicep worship. Society itself reorganized. Leadership became literal. Whoever could lift the throne owned it. Elections were less about speeches and more about demonstrations. In the Strong Age, the concept of bureaucracy never developed. Too slow, too paper-based. Decisions were short, loud, and final. Government policy, in most cases, involved throwing something very far.
Ah yes, leadership. Back then, if you wanted respect, you didn't write decrees. You threw boulders.
If they landed close, you were wise. If they landed far, you were king.
Pull together, pull!
Yet beneath the noise and might, there was order. Division of labor still existed, but no one worked alone. Teams of hundreds moved in rhythmic unison, each gesture choreographed like a living machine. Craftsmanship evolved into choreography. Strength itself became currency. Marriage alliances, trade agreements, even social rituals revolved around public displays of power. Festivals were less about music, more about who could uproot the biggest tree. Without the pressure to invent tools, the mind evolved differently. Abstract thought came later. Art began not as painting or writing, but as sculpture. Stone bent to the will of muscle, long before ideas bent to the will of intellect. Their version of poetry? Buildings that didn't fall down. Still, a question lingers. When everything can be moved, lifted, or broken, what do you value most? For the strong people, the answer was endurance, strength that lasted generations, cities carved to survive everything, except time. Every civilization eventually learns that might alone can't hold the world together, but in their age, it was enough. Their monuments still stand, silent proof that for a time, power really was architecture.
The ambitionary man.
Well, they built to last. I suppose that's what happens when your construction crew can bench press history.
They did not fight over territory, nor survival.
When the body becomes
Not
civilization's
anymore.
greatest weapon,
At the peak
peace
of their
becomes a
might,
rare
the
luxury.
strength line-
In our timeline, the spear and the sling gave distance, a merciful space between killer and killed. But here, there was no distance.
generations
Every
they
conflict
ruled
was
these
intimate.
lands.
Historians
Yet,
in this world would
the
later
echoes
call
of
it
their
the
conflict
age of
would
broken
soon
grounds.
silence their
Not
reign.
because they tilled soil, but because they shattered it underfoot. Without ranged warfare, victory depended on proximity, endurance, and whatever bones remained intact after the first 30 seconds. And because muscle decided status, diplomacy quickly learned to flex. Tribes grew larger, armies formed. The strongest of the strong, the Titan clans, carved their rule not through language, but through sound.
For the ancestors.
One roar could rally 100 warriors. One footstep could start a war.
Historians like to say humanity invented war when it first picked up a stick. These people were the stick.
Imagine writing peace treaties when your pen keeps breaking stone tablets.
For our tribe.
Each confrontation left geological signatures, depressions, fractures, entire ridges leveled. Archaeologists millions of years later would misinterpret them as tectonic faults. In truth, they were battlefields. With time, the chaos professionalized. Strength became an institution. Armies built around bloodlines, dynasties of muscle. Their banners weren't woven, they were carried by whoever could hold them the longest. Yet, where there's hierarchy, there's innovation. Those less strong, yet more observant, began shaping tactics, using terrain,
Honor the
wind,
fallen.
deception.
Their
The first
spirits
whispers of
rise
strategy
to
were
the
born not from
ancestors
intellect
now.
alone, but from survival against one's own species. And thus, irony enters stage left. Even in a world built on strength, the mind, that fragile muscle, refused to surrender entirely.
Back then, we fought for pride, food, and occasionally who had the bigger rock.
Now we fight nostalgia. It's less painful, but far more boring. Still, can't deny, there's a certain poetry in seeing the ground crack before you do.
From these endless contests rose empires that shone like stormlight.
We remember
Brief,
the battles,
brilliant,
so we do
devastating.
not repeat the past.
But muscle alone cannot sustain civilization. When every ruler must prove dominance physically, succession is a blood sport. Politics in this age was measured in fractures, and when famine came, as it always does, the strongest consumed the rest. Quite literally in some darker stories. Nature, indifferent, simply observed and adapted. Yet, for all its brutality, something else emerged from the dust. Myth. The heroes of this era were not gods, but mortals who broke mountains. Legends of thunder-born kings and storm-fisted queens endured long after their bones returned to soil. And perhaps in those stories lay the seed of restraint, a whisper that strength, unchecked, devours its own purpose. The Age of Broken Grounds eventually collapsed under its own gravity, but its echoes, the instinct to dominate, the celebration of might, never truly left us. They simply evolved into politics, industry, and the occasional gym membership.
Progress. We traded boulders for bureaucracy, and somehow, I missed the boulders.
When strength becomes the foundation of civilization, everything else bends to its weight. From architecture to agriculture, from cooking to courtship, every detail of life reshapes itself around the physics of power. The day begins not with the crow of a rooster, but with the booming boom of someone splitting a log bare-handed. Homes, if you can call structures of solid timber and stone homes, creak as families stir. Each household is its own fortress, built with beams thicker than a man's waist. No delicate utensils, no fragile pottery. A breakfast bowl here could double as siege equipment. It's a world where even furniture fears its owners. With muscles that could plow a field without a plow, agriculture became efficient. Farms stretch for miles, not tended by fragile tools, but by sheer human endurance. Men and women pull entire tree trunks to mark fields, reshape rivers by hand, and carve terraces and hillsides with crude stone blades. Oxen? Obsolete. The beasts of burden now wear boots. But there's a price for power. When your daily calorie count rivals a freight train, you don't eat, you harvest energy. A single feast could feed an entire village in our world. Here, it barely covers lunch. Their cuisine evolved for volume. No spices, no elegance, just fuel. Food was culture's truest mirror, heavy, practical, and unapologetically excessive.
The gods favor us tonight. Eat well, my friends.
Cities rise like mountain ranges, vast stone platforms, colossal archways, dwellings that could house mammoths. Without delicate engineering, construction followed the law of the boulder. If you can lift it, you can build with it. Their streets were wide, not for traffic, but for swinging room. Monuments weren't carved to inspire awe, they were built to prove it. Even artistry had weight. Sculptures weren't chiseled, they were punched into shape. Childhood in this world came with fewer safety warnings. Toys weighed 5 kilograms. Games involved logs, stones, and the occasional mild concussion. In our timeline, we invented chess to sharpen the mind. In theirs, a game called Throw It Farther. The loser usually needed medical attention. Entertainment was not for the faint of heart. Festivals celebrated strength, not art, not music, but endurance and spectacle. Contests of lifting, wrestling, or log tossing became central rituals of identity. Every culture has its myths. Ours has Hercules. Theirs had everyone. When strength defines status, love becomes performative. Courtship involved feats of endurance. Carrying your partner across rivers, uprooting trees, building homes by hand. In our world, we write poems. In theirs, you bring proof. Preferably something that used to be part of the landscape. Over generations, they began to ask the question all civilizations eventually face. If strength is everything, what happens when it fades? The elders became living myths, too strong to die quietly, too heavy for the afterlife to carry. They trained, advised, remembered. Perhaps that was their greatest evolution. Not muscle, but memory. In this world of giants, daily life was both magnificent and exhausting. Every step reshaped the earth. Every action carved its memory into stone. Their civilization thrived on brute power, a monument to what humanity could be if it chose the body over the brain. They say might makes right. But in this world, might made breakfast, built cities, and carried love on its shoulders, until gravity remembered who's really in charge. Strength has a price tag. For the strong people, it was written in bone and muscle, in every heartbeat that carried the weight of evolution's boldest experiment. To sustain that kind of mass, nature had to rewrite the rulebook. Their hearts grew enormous, thick-walled chambers built to drive blood through colossal limbs. Their lungs expanded outward and downward, merging into the ribcage like twin bellows. Their entire torso became an engine, not of speed, but of sheer endurance under load. And with great power came extremely expensive meal plans. A single day's effort demanded tens of thousands of calories, enough to feed a modern human village. Their metabolism roared like a furnace. Fat was scarce. Hunger was constant. Every hunt was not luxury. It was maintenance.
Now, you might think biology simply scales up, but it doesn't. Double the size and the stress on bones quadruples. Evolution had to innovate. Thicker trabecular bone lattices, denser calcium deposition, even cartilage reinforced with microfibered collagen. Nature got creative, or desperate.
Don't move.
Still,
This will hurt,
they weren't
but it will
indestructible.
heal.
Their very size slowed repair. A broken
so
bone
hot.
meant weeks of vulnerability. Infection could end a dynasty. And hearts that strong? They wore out fast. Giants burned bright and brief. The average lifespan was short, but rich. To live powerful was enough. They didn't measure years, but deeds.
Strong bones don't make strong minds. But they make good tools for the ones who have them.
He's not wrong. Their innovation was physical. Tools shaped by touch, cities molded by hand. They built without cranes, calculated load by instinct, and used their bodies as the first machines. Every tendon was a cable, every joint a hinge. Anatomy and architecture became one. They didn't separate biology from identity. Their gods were shaped like them, swollen with sinew, perfect in proportion. Mythology itself became a mirror. Power equaled virtue. Weakness was sin. And yet, even in their biology, innovation kept pushing boundaries. Some lineages adapted differently. Compact builds for endurance, others with elongated torsos for reach. Natural selection splintered the strong into castes of specialization. Builders, runners, hunters, guards. Innovation doesn't stop with the body. They experimented, binding wounds with animal tendon, reinforcing stone with bone powder, tanning hides into near armor. Primitive biotechnology at its most hands-on. But the line between adaptation and excess is thin. The stronger they became, the more energy they needed. And as prey dwindled and climates changed, nature presented its invoice. For every evolutionary advantage, there's a hidden liability. They could outfight anything, except scarcity. Maybe that was always the truth. Strength, unbalanced, becomes fragility in disguise. And if evolution teaches anything, it's that muscles don't make good accountants.
A monument to sheer stubbornness.
The age of muscle was magnificent. But even the strongest spine bends under the weight of history. For centuries, they built and battled and lifted their world into shape. Yet every triumph carved a deeper toll on their bodies, their minds, and their future. Endurance, once their pride, became their prison. Arms swollen from labor, lungs thick with dust, joints worn to sand. Generations born into work so constant it became ritual, and ritual so sacred it became unquestionable. Strength was the only language they ever trusted, and like all languages, it began to lose meaning when repeated too long. They could move mountains, but could not heal themselves. They could lift stones heavier than hope, but couldn't lift the question of why. Their monuments stood tall, their bodies did not. Their muscles turned to memory, and their memory turned into myth. Then something changed. One day, one of them refused to lift. He sat beneath a broken pillar and simply thought. It was the most radical act of rebellion in their entire history. Thought became talk. Talk became teaching. And teaching, somehow, became
The plains
creation.
remember when we were many. Now the grass grows over our father's house. The winds whisper
Their
of
children
change,
began to
but the
build
stones
smaller.
Remember the old
Tools
ways.
grew finer.
We
Hands
must
grew
listen
gentler.
closely now.
1,000 years of brute endurance began to crumble under the whisper of invention. The strong people were becoming something else, not weaker, just different. They learned to trade muscle for mind and sweat for spark, and for the first time, the earth beneath them began to tremble, not from their footsteps, but from their ideas. Yet every new path demands an offering. When they turned from strength, they turned also from simplicity. The warmth of shared struggle gave way to cold precision, the smell of sweat and smoke replaced by the hiss of stone and spark. In building a gentler world, they lost the poetry of pain. Their temples fell silent. Their songs, once rhythmic with work, faded into quiet thinking. And with that quiet came something entirely new: guilt. They began to write about their ancestors as if they were beasts, crude, violent, simple. But the truth was less flattering. The beasts had built the foundation they were now too fragile to walk upon. Perhaps progress is not about rising higher, but simply daring to stand still long enough to ask what it cost. The strong people vanished, not in battle, but in transformation. Their blood flowed into new generations, smaller, cleverer, thinner-skinned. And the memory of the great lifters and builders faded into story. Today, we call their extinction evolution. But to them, it might have felt like surrender. They were giants, not because of what they carried, but because of what they left behind. A world that no longer needed them, and a humanity that still remembers. The Age of Strength did not end in thunder. It ended in hunger and memory. In a world that worshipped muscle, nature eventually asked a quiet question. How much weight can a heart carry when the arms never tire? The surviving tribes, once giants among beasts, grew fewer. Their bodies too demanding, their world too drained. Forests receded where they had built, rivers changed course under their weight. And as the centuries shifted, their children grew. Smaller, lighter, quieter. Adaptation's way of whispering, enough. Yet, not all was lost. Their stories remained, carved into monoliths the size of temples. Their myths sang of heroes who could bend mountains, of gods that bled iron, of lovers whose embraces cracked stone. Perhaps exaggerations, or perhaps fossils of memory. Every civilization leaves a legacy. Some build libraries, others very large footprints.
Look at this.
But those who came after, smaller yet quicker of mind, found wonder in the ruins. They measured handprints in stone and asked, who were they? And the answer, of course, was us. A different branch, a different bargain, for in every sinew of our present, some echo remains. The thrill of exertion, the pride of endurance, the memory of survival through strength. We build machines now to do our lifting, but we still admire those who push their bodies beyond reason. Olympians, lifters, soldiers, a flicker of the strength that once ruled our destiny. Evolution, it seems, never really forgot. It simply diversified its portfolio. Had the giants survived, perhaps they'd look at us and laugh. Small, fragile, but annoyingly persistent. Hector, if he'd lived to see this new world, might have said something like, "Strength is good, but it doesn't keep you fed when your dinner runs faster than you." And he'd be right, because strength, like any power, is a currency. And in the economy of survival, flexibility always outbids brute force. As the strong faded, their bones became mountains, literal and metaphorical. Archaeologists found traces of extraordinary musculature, thick bone density, impossible leverage, and myths blurred with science as they often do. Were they gods, beasts, or simply us, before we learned that Brawn alone could not lift a civilization? The final lesson came not from their triumphs, but their decline. Power, untempered by foresight, consumes itself. Civilizations collapse not when they grow weak, but when they stop evolving. The true strength of our species was never in the arm. It was in the hand, the one that shapes, learns, and remembers. We still build monuments, only now they reach upward instead of outward. And our giants are no longer carved of flesh, but of ideas. Every skyscraper, every rocket, every athlete is an echo, a whisper of the age when strength alone defined the world.
So, what did we learn? Maybe that the universe rewards those who adapt and quietly retires those who only flex.
Still, I wouldn't mind having one of them on moving day.
In the end, every civilization writes its own myth, and ours is the story of strength transformed, from muscle to mind, from survival to meaning. The giants are gone, but their echo, that heartbeat of might, still beats, quietly, in us all.